Hello, Barry Chant here again. Can you see the invisible? Can you do the impossible? Well, certainly I hope we can see more of the invisible than we were being able to see before. And I hope that God is beginning to open your eyes through the power of the Holy Spirit. It's very important to be filled with the Spirit here, to allow the Spirit of God to just teach us or to show us things that we wouldn't know otherwise. It's really crucial. So I hope that you're, through this whole study, also, while we're focusing on Jesus and the greatness of Jesus, I hope also that you are thinking about the references to the Holy Spirit we've seen so far, and how important it is to be a Spirit-filled believer. But now we're coming to kind of a grand climax to this whole chapter, where Paul, now having talked about the great, extraordinary, hyperbolistic power of God, has raised Jesus far above all names and authorities and powers and whatever you can think of. But here's the real key to the whole thing now. So in these last two verses, of verses 22 and 23, where, well, I want to read 22 again, because in verse 22 he said, he put all things under his feet and gave him his head over all things to the church, which is his body, the fullness of him who fills all in all. Now, we said that all things are put under his feet. I understand that. But it's more than that now, because he says that God gave Jesus as head over all things to whom? God gave Jesus as head over, gave to whom? The answer is clear in the verse, to the church. Now the church is God's people, and no matter what denomination they may be, and no matter what group they may belong to, no matter how they may want to name themselves or brand themselves, no matter what buildings or institutions or anything else we may have, none of that really matters much, because the church ultimately is the people of God. The church can exist without buildings, it can exist without structures, it can exist without organizations. It may not exist so well, but it can, because the church is composed of people. And those people, unless they are totally wiped out, make the church. And people, enemies of the church would try for generations to get rid of it, but the reality is that the church survives. Wherever it gets put down in one place, it rises up in another, and often it rises up in the very place where it's put down. So God's church is very strong, and where things look impossible, where it seems that we could never hope to survive, in actual fact, the people of God do survive and will survive until the end of the age. And here, Paul says that God put everything under his feet and gave him to the church. Now, I just do a little bit of metaphysical thinking here. And it goes on to say the church is his body. So if all things are under the feet of Jesus and the church is the body of Jesus, that means necessarily all things are under our feet too. Now again, we have to dismiss any concept here of political terminology or thinking. We're not talking about political authority. The Christians have made that mistake in the past more than once, and it doesn't really help. We're talking of spiritual authority here, means, and especially over sin and over evil. And that's what I want to stress, because the one thing the devil wants us to do more than anything else is to sin. Now, we can get upset sometimes about immorality, about Ouija boards, about spiritualism, about witchcraft, about movies and about dancing, and all those things, which in themselves are simply expressions of something far deeper, and the deeper thing is sin. The devil wants us to sin. It was sin that crucified Jesus. And what these verses are telling us, that although we may sometimes find it impossible, we think, to overcome sin, the fact is that we can overcome it, because we have this extraordinary power we've been looking at that is given to us by God, so we can live victoriously. And it's no excuse to say, oh, well, if you had the temptation I had, or if you was as tired as I was, or if you knew my wife or my husband, or you knew how hard it is to live on small wages, or if you knew how seriously I've been in pain. Look, they're all real issues, and I don't want to put any of them down because they're all hard to deal with. But the fact is, in terms of sin, there is no excuse. Jesus has given us everything we need to overcome sin. And living a holy, godly life is what we are called to do. That's his purpose for us. We've talked about this hope, this glorious calling. We now talk about the wonderful, extraordinary power of God. And now that everything is put under the feet of Jesus, and that means under our feet too. So, if you can see that, which is seeing the invisible, then you can do the impossible, which is overcoming sin and living a victorious Christian life. So I pray, as Paul prayed, for you to have a spirit of wisdom and revelation in the knowledge of Christ, that these things may be true for you. Well, good on you. We'll see you for the last study tomorrow. Bless you now.